All right, good evening. We are live on Facebook. Shall we record, guys, if that's okay?
Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome. Good to see you guys. It's been a little while since all three of us have been together, right? Rich, you pointed that out.
No
Great.
joke. No joke. This is the first three person full jam in I don't know how long. It's been months.
It's
It's been a while. It's been a while, but we have lots of good things coming up.
Yeah.
I would like to say I've missed you guys, but behind the scenes, I've seen you plenty. But welcome everyone that's listening to us, and we have a special show today. It's an important anniversary show, not a celebratory one, but more of a commemorative one.
Yeah.
We have an amazing guest that we have lined up. It's been great. Yeah, it's been great to be able to do this, the three of us again, and we'll continue building on this moving into the 2022. David, Richard, anything more?
Yeah, David, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I guess we could just give everyone an update what we've been up to. Let's just start recording on Zoom if that's okay. Can we do that? I don't see it recording on Zoom.
Boom.
Is it?
Ta-da!
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you guys for that. No, it's good to be back. We've all got a bunch going on. I guess we're all going to share that in just a moment. For me, the biggest thing for me is I started grad school in August. Rich, you and I got to do a show prior to that.
Right.
And then, we've had shows here and there, but we have not had the chance to all be together. So it's great to all be back together. That's really been the biggest thing for me. It's taken up quite a bit of my time now. And I'm going to be studying.
I know we had a couple of we had a couple of premieres that we hosted, which was really exciting stuff.
Yes,
which in some ways seems like forever ago.
Yeah, October.
And we hope Jivan is doing well. And we're excited for that release. But for me, I've started training again for the AIDS Life Cycle ride. Me and about 2,700 other riders are going to be going from San Francisco to Los Angeles on bicycles. So training season has begun. And there is a small contingent of Armenians who actually do that ride, which is really cool. Every once in a while, you'll see an Armenian flag roll by, which is awesome. So I don't know, just making music, which is great. We've got a fantastic band I'm playing with called Lucy Lane. And, just excited to be with you guys again and, just spreading the word. So
amazing. So today obviously is an anniversary show. It's been 32 years since the egregious, horrendous Baku Pogroms, which, by the way, were not the first pogroms of Azerbaijan. Sorry, just rolling into the topic of the
for sure.
Greg, did you give what you've been up to? You've been up to some big stuff.
Dude, I've been up to a lot of stuff. I just want to, our guest is in the waiting room, and I'm yeah, there's plenty going on. I just got off a live with a wine influencer. We were talking about what do you call it? What Karin Wine is up to. Speaking of Karin Wine, always nearby. There's a lot happening, but a lot of positive stuff, and I'll be kind of updating you guys as it goes along. A lot of cool things, a lot of exciting things, a lot of things that are really weighing in on me. But Karin Wine is expanding and is growing, and it's going good. But
it's amazing. Award-winning Karin Wine. Yeah, I mean, you had wine. You had your crush and your harvest.
All of it, dude. All of it. That was actually part of the reason why we've been kind of separated, the three of us, is I was unable to be as fully engaged with Arach Media as I was before.
Yeah, it's okay. So you've been busy. Yeah, awesome.
But we have a returning friend of the show. She's actually waiting in the waiting room. We'll let her in a sec. Astvatsaturian Turcotte, somebody that was a guest. David, you mentioned when? A year ago,
it was June 10 of last year.
June 10 of last year, yeah. Someone that's a big advocate for Artsakh Sunni community of the Baku Armenians, or Armenians formerly of Azerbaijan. Not often the same as Artsakh, right? Because Artsakh is a free entity, but these are all immigrants from Azerbaijan, which is a lot of people that have left. We want to kind of dive into talking to her about what that was like. She's a refugee. She's an author, an advocate for our community here in the United States, and now is fundraising for initiatives in Armenia as well. I think we should let Anna in.
Okay,
And,
let's do it.
okay.
Yeah.
Let's try. Boom.
And David, it's been since June, isn't that correct? Since our last connection.
June 10, I had the privilege of meeting Anna, working with her through the Bay Area Artsakh Task Force. And we had a town hall with Anna there, and there she is.
Welcome,
Hey.
welcome. How are you? Thank you for joining us. Thank you for staying up. I know you're on the East Coast.
Yes, thank you so much.
I'm actually was giving you a hard time because I actually am a night owl, so it's okay.
All right.
Yeah, I know. I get it. I've had musicians hours for 3 decades now, so if I get to bed before midnight, it's a miracle.
Yeah.
Anna, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
So much.
As
Welcome
we wanted
back.
to kind of jump in and start talking about the kind of the somber yet important anniversary, right? But prior to that, we just want to kind of run through what have you been up to. You're returning to Arach Media to talk to us. You've been very busy doing a lot of things with your foundation, with a couple of trips now and to Armenia and back. Give us a little roundup, and also for what we can help fundraise for, what you're doing now, what's front and center for you, and then we'll jump into what we are here to talk about, to educate the community about.
Well, remind me when the last time I was here, because my mind is just, mush of all kinds of things, Artsakh and Armenian.
No, it's okay. You've been quite busy as well in the last 6+ months. It was June 10. You were a guest on our show.
Returned.
And we were so great. We were really glad to have you, and glad to have you back. Welcome back. Yeah.
Thank you, David. You were very sweet. So June 10th is I just returned from Armenia.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, I didn't go to Artsakh for many different reasons, and it was very disappointing for me. It felt like a wasted trip, although I did a lot of things. But the first trip after the war, I felt like I needed to be there, but I couldn't. Not because I wasn't let in. Actually, I got a visa. There were just some reports that I shouldn't be traveling.
For safety reasons.
For safety reasons, because I was on national TV in Azerbaijan, and they know, my activity for the last 10 years. So, I'm a mom of 2 kids, and I made the decision not to go. I was warned by Armenian Minister of Foreign Affairs and also some in Artsakh. So, but I did go back in October, and I did go to Artsakh. So. Preparation for that trip and all kinds of things, humanitarian things that I was doing here, preparing for it, and also, just trying to get a hold of friends, and things are just so different now, and
Yes.
and even projects like the contacts that I have in the region, they're not things are not the same, both from the government perspective, the contacts I had in the government to be able to implement some of my projects, and also, individuals. They were so impacted by the war that many of them are not doing what they used to do.
Right.
Wow, that is impactful. How was the trip to Artsakh? How did you feel coming in? Post everything that's happened, what was it like being there, traveling there, the road to Stepanakert and beyond, and how did you feel in Artsakh while you were there?
So the way I traveled was very different from just the everyday diasporan that gets a visa to go there. So I'm not going to go into details how that was, but there are so many checkpoints for both the everyday Armenian with Armenian visa and a diasporan that's traveling there with a visa, with or without Armenian passport. There are checkpoints. There are, every few moments, every few miles, you have a Russian checkpoint with machine guns and, you know, all 9 yards. So it feels very strange. I guess, you know, it's very, I don't get scared of things like that. It just was eerie because you're driving through Lachin and it's empty. You know, there are some settlements there where Armenians stayed, but most of them, you know, you look and the houses are empty. So that whole corridor is just nature. You can't stop to take a picture. Obviously, I wouldn't, because I didn't want to leave the car. But you know, usually I stop on the way to Stepanakert and take photos, and you know, every season is so beautiful there, but I couldn't do that. And I, you know, the first checkpoint is Armenian, and then the rest are, because you're leaving Armenia, and then the rest are Russian. And then at the very end, as you're about to get into Stepanakert, there's Shushi and the Azeri military on the side. But the Russian checkpoint right there, and we're building some electrical, I don't know what they're called, but you know, the equipment that produces electricity.
Like transformers and that kind of thing.
Yeah, they were just ginormous, and you could tell that some of the soldiers were Turkish, although there were no Turkish flags, and Azeri. And then there was a point in the right as you pass Shushi, and you see that, you know, sign where it really upsetting. It was really upsetting to a lot of people that came before me and came back with those pictures. You know, that was not upsetting to me as much as you have Azeri vehicles, and then the Russian vehicles, and then the Armenian vehicles trying to maneuver around each other in this narrow road, and you know, they kind of stare down at you from the big trucks, and that was upsetting to me, just for personal safety, and you know, living in Azerbaijan and having been fearful for my life before, just being near that kind of a
so just to give you like three people, sorry Richard, one day where you will be there as well, 3 people on this show right now have been to Artsakh. David, just to give you an idea, the entry point into Shushi, where that tank, the heroic Armenian tank was, is no longer in our control, right? That point
no, I figured
is where all of that is, right?
Yeah,
where
I figured. Yeah, I have many photos on that tank. Yeah.
But I don't think that tank is under Azeri control. I think it still is, but that's the stretch. Yes.
Yeah.
So I just want to do a quick level set because as I look at the numbers and where some of our viewers are from, we've got viewers not only around the country, but in some other parts of the world. And not all of them are Armenian, not all of them are from the diaspora, and not all of them know exactly what it is we're talking about. So I just want to do a quick, like 20-second like overview. And what we're talking about here when we're talking about Stepanakert and Shushi, and we're talking about these places. If you can imagine that the genocide that happened in the First World War in 1915 to 17 and 23, Armenia was a much larger area within the Ottoman Empire, and many of those provinces got absorbed by what is now modern Turkey, and what has been historically an Armenian enclave since essentially the dawn of time, we call Artsakh. And a little over a year ago, there was a war in which Azerbaijan claimed territorial rights over it because Stalin from the Soviet Union had ordained it so. And so that fight began in earnest in the fall of 2019, and 20. And so, and many of us have been on high alert broadcasting ever since. And Anna is here to talk a little bit about her experience living there and what she's doing now. And the pogroms that we're talking about are in Baku, which is the capital of Azerbaijan, which Greg, as you recall, you mentioned it was actually built by Armenians in the first place.
Oh, yes. And Anna would be the best person to ask this question, but that's a very good segue into the main topic of the conversation today. Yeah, we are in the 32nd anniversary of the Baku Pogroms, and from what I believe, remind me again, that was the third of the three major pogroms.
That was
right?
the last.
The last
right?
one, yeah. The
last
first one
Mhm.
being in Sumgait, and then Kirovabad, which is now the second largest city, called Ganja. Kirovabad being the name in the Soviet times, and then Baku being the last of the three, right?
And it was
Right, and these were the large pogroms, and I always, when I talk about them, I want to emphasize that yes, those are the three, but in between them, people still were killed. So they were not as organized, but people were being killed in all kinds of different places, and so, but those are the three, yes.
Excellent. And going back to the statement that Richard made, again, we are approaching all our topics, such as this is something that we want the diaspora to know. Many do know, but many need to be educated. Let's talk about Armenians in Soviet Azerbaijan just in general. It was a large population, wasn't it? Baku was a very Armenian city, and so were the other major populated urban centers of Soviet Azerbaijan. Is that correct?
Yes, and they've always been there, right? They've always been there. There are generations that lived there, and they were continuously purged. My grandfather. I'm not originally from Artsakh. Everyone assumes that everyone from Baku is from Artsakh. Actually, my ancestors came from Sunik and traveled to Baku during the Armenian genocide, and stayed there for 3 years, and experienced another ethnic cleansing in 1918. And about 30,000 Armenians were killed in Baku, and then traveled to Turkmenistan until 1923, survived, and went back to Armenia, where my grandfather went to university and built a life. But then in the Soviet times, many went to Baku for work, right? It was 30 some years after the genocide. There was no work in Armenia. Armenia was very rural. Yerevan was very rural. And so all the industry jobs were in Azerbaijan because of oil, because of the Caspian Sea, seaside, and the waterfront work that they were doing. Fishing and all that stuff. So my grandfather went there in the 40s, and again, knowing what he knew, he felt comfortable going, because the Soviet Union was, there's no way that this could happen in the Soviet times. So it's, we're very forgiving people, and this again happened in my family the third time in 1980s and 90s. So yes, huge community in Yerevan. We had family that would come and visit us openly, because of the sea, the beach. Baku was the major hub of all the intellectuals and engineers, architects. And the elite lived in Baku, along with Greeks and Jews and a lot of Russians. It used to be a part of the Russian Empire, and Azeris as well. But Azeris were definitely a minority in the city.
And this is something that we really, really want to drill down to those people that, and myself, actively is Armenian, right? It is kind of like everyone goes from this internationalist concept now, like, oh, well, how come these capitals of other countries were predominantly Armenian? Well, this was all Armenian areas. These were cities created by Armenians. The borders then crossed us. You know what I mean? That's the easiest way of describing.
Yeah, the borders crossed us. That's right.
Right, but I would not go to as far as to say that was Armenian land. I think that there's this danger of doing that, and I know that Prime Minister Pashinyan referred to that there's a difference between Armenians building Baku and Armenian Baku, you know.
Exactly. Absolutely.
So yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
Yeah, but I would also argue that the gray area becomes, when we start talking about Artsakh in terms of it being Azeri land, in which I don't even know how anyone could have that conversation with a straight face.
Oh, well, Artsakh was never Azeri land. Artsakh is not Baku. Baku is on the very east of Azerbaijan.
And we're going to pull up a map. We'll pull up a map to show. But
so that just to give an understanding, Tiflis, Yerevan, Baku, Sumgait is the what do you call it? The suburb, quote unquote, of Baku.
Yeah, it's
right?
about 30-minute drive.
30-minute drive, and then there's Kirovabad, which is Ganja today, which is further closer to Armenia, and all of this area is Artsakh.
Right. So in many ways, Baku Armenians were, we could understand why we were being killed in Baku for the Artsakh movement, because we didn't have anything to do with it. We were completely removed from it, aside from being ethnic Armenians. We were not claiming Baku was Armenian. It was
exactly.
Artsakh.
So now 32 years since, right? We have this kind of we're at this horrible time in our history where we're seeing, what. Let me kind of level set this. When the issues in Baku started erupting, Sumgait, Baku, and the pogroms in general, right?
Yeah.
To us, the Soviet Union Armenians, it was essentially ethnic tensions frozen since the genocide and the Shushi massacres of early 20th century, right? Whereas now is being presented as some kind of internal conflicts, civil war, tensions, ethnic tensions, when in reality, one nation, two states is what we are always being told about Azeris and Turks, and that is what is being kind of manifested essentially, right?
Yeah, and that even before it manifested, it happened in 1905, in 1918, as the Turks were perpetrating Armenian genocide. Things would happen in Baku and in the rest of Azerbaijan. In Artsakh, there were massacres in Artsakh, itself. And in 1918, as the Turks were moving toward Azerbaijan, they were literally teaching Azeris how to commit a genocide, and that's when 30,000 Armenians were killed in Baku. So, as the Soviet Union took shape, and there was a lot of brutality against anyone who was nationalistic, right? We're all Soviets, and we're all, friendly to each other, and there's no religion. So, there's no Muslim, and there's no Christian, and there's ethnicity, yes, recognized, but the language was also, people were encouraged to go to Russian schools if they wanted to have a Russian education, to have a good job. So if you went into an Armenian university versus a Russian-speaking university, you might not be as employable, So there was this, I would say, whitewashing of cultures.
Right.
But
there's a couple of things I'd like to mention about that. One is, for many of our viewers who may be asking themselves, this is in 1903, we're talking about early 1900s. Why are we still talking about that now? For those who don't really understand, there's a level of privilege attached to not having to think about that kind of history, because in this country, if it happened 20 years ago, that's ancient history. But in many parts of the world, for many of us, the legacy of these actions are what we're living with on a day-to-day basis. So first of all, I need that to be known. The second thing is, Anna, when you're talking about them teaching how to commit genocide, that isn't an ancient thing from the early 1900s. That's still happening today in Azerbaijan, when they're teaching little children in kindergarten and first and second grade how to hate Armenians, and that they're demonizing us in a way, much like the 1930s Germans were teaching their kids how to dehumanize Jews. So there's a lot of similarities in these pathways. And so for anybody who thinks this is a dead issue, this is 100 years ago, this is a long term, this is a current, active, live situation. So I just wanted to make that clear.
No, and absolutely, and I think I was trying to make that that point in the last 10 years of my advocacy, both politically and within our own culture, within our own diaspora. That
Right.
there's no such understanding that this is continuation of the Armenian genocide. I also wanted to draw a distinction that Baku itself was not genocide. Baku in isolation as a pogrom was not genocide by, international
Definition.
legal definitions. Yeah. And but if you combine it with the rest of what happened in the last 106 years, it absolutely is part of it, and it continues today. And people kind of brushed it aside for decades, including Armenian government.
Well, that's what I'd like to kind of, and before we actually go into, first of all, major announcement is Anna is a survivor of the Baku pogroms. We're going to reiterate that. Thank you for sharing this your story with us, and I know you also have authored a book on this matter, and you've been advocating for the diaspora and the world to understand what happened. You mentioned that kind of when you came here, you feel that there was a little bit, and I can echo it as well as an Armenian from Tiflis. You don't have to stand here alone on this matter. There is a little bit of a disconnect between like the Western diaspora and then what's been happening over there. And at no one's fault, but maybe some of the institutions can come, start waking up to that now, and we can course correct. Is that true? Is that how you felt? You're like, no one really gets what happened here. No one really understands
yes.
the
Yes, and our last names ended in OV and OVA. So even to get, $1,000 scholarship for college as a, just coming to United States and trying to find extra money, applying for an Armenian scholarship, I had to send a picture of myself to an organization in Los Angeles to prove that I was Armenian. Not a scan of my birth certificate that says Armenian on it, but the picture. So there's this confusion about who we are because we spoke Russian. We were not educated in Armenian. Armenian schools were, by the way, closed in the 70s. There was this nationalistic movement by Azerbaijanis. At first, they really didn't know who they were. They were kind of part of the Ottoman Empire, ideologically and religiously and culturally. And then they were becoming Azeris, whatever that was. I know that in my family, a lot of the rugs, in the 30s and the 40s, during the, a time of a need, people were hungry. A lot of Armenian families sold their rugs. And so these carpets then were taken to factories in Ganja, for example, and unwoven to see how they were made so that they could make Azerbaijani rugs. And a lot of Azeris, intellectual Azeris have an issue with me saying that because they don't believe it, but it's all, all these things were
right.
Anyway, but
no. That's actually that's a very, very good point. That's so important. It's very succinct because essentially we need to understand that there wasn't an ancient Azeri state and then Armenians were an ethnic problem to them. There was essentially an Azeri state that was being fabricated in a way that it was grinding up against Armenian culture. And that is when people ask me, well, give me the backbone, like why? I'm like, we essentially gave the birth of their nation is an antithesis to anything that Armenians in that region are. And that's what Anna is saying. They were literally absorbing our culture, putting it on, and then manifesting themselves as Azeris. Azeris in 1940 still had no idea what they are as Azerbaijanis. 1950s, they got more, 60s, 70s, discrimination and all that. And this, obviously the Soviet experiment was helping them. So,
right. Well, go ahead, Anna. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. And I want to say that is why there's such fascination. You don't see Turks act this way, right? Turks are not obsessed with Armenia the way that Azeris are obsessed with Armenia. They have their own history and their own culture. They have their, authors. You don't see arguments of Turks and Persians, Iranians about Nizami, for example. Nizami was a Persian poet, and Azeris are saying no, he was a
Right,
so
right.
you don't see that in a Turkish culture, but that's why there's such almost obsession,
Right.
with who we are.
Well, there's a couple points I'd like to make. One is the when you talk about them unwinding the fabrics of the rugs in order to manufacture their own.
Right.
That to me is a very interesting and poignant underscoring of what the genocide actually is. Because in modern terms, when we talk about genocide, oftentimes the first thing that people think of is massacres and mass killings. And even then, that is too much for most people to really comprehend what that actually means. But what it genuinely means is the erasure of a people, the erasure of their culture, and the attempt to forge a history where they didn't exist in the first place. And part of doing so is to unwind not only their ties to the land, but all their economic condition as well. And that happened, I know, through most of occupied Western Armenia, which is now Eastern Turkey, because they took manifests of what each person owned and then gave it to somebody else. And so the bulk of their economic system was literally built on our backs. That's the first point I wanted to make. The second thing is, and I guess it's more of a question, do you think that some of the lack of information coming from Azerbaijan, especially in the 70s, and when these, and maybe we could put some dates to these pogroms just to put it in context, but do you think that the lack of information coming out is largely due to it being a Soviet republic and having there being an information block?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when Sumgait happened in February of 1988, we knew only because my uncle was there. My uncle lived in Baku and commuted once a week to Sumgait. He was an engineer, and that was part of his job to work part of the time in Sumgait. And he was trapped there for a few days during the massacres. He saw women being thrown out of balconies, burned alive, raped, all kinds of things, and furniture all over the floor, and all over the streets. He came back, and he was a very, I would say, wealthy, well-established person. Just got an apartment, which is a big deal to get an apartment. Soviet Union,
very big deal, yeah.
And his family moved separately from his parents, and all of a sudden, he just literally a week later they moved to Russia, but we didn't know. There was no Soviet government didn't put it on TV because things like that don't happen in the Soviet Union. We're all friends here, right? And then we're like, these rumors, unless it was our uncle, if it wasn't for my uncle, we would have thought there's no way, because the iron grip was so strong, to let nationalistic violence like that occur in the Soviet Union was unheard of. So
that wasn't even being communicated within the Soviet Union?
No, Richard.
Within Azerbaijan itself, no.
Yeah.
I just want to make that clear, that's all.
Yeah, that's
excellent. I'm not shocked.
No. Excellent point to make. Something that I mentioned on a previous talk with Anna was, it seems like people in the West need to understand the way that we understood in Soviet Union that Chernobyl happened was through Swedish meteorologists noticing that there was a plume of radioactive clouds over Stockholm. Okay. So nowadays, in hindsight, you're like, oh, Chernobyl happened. Y'all were all kind of on, DEFCON 5 or whatever.
As though it was tweeted on CNN.
It was literally somebody else. And that's when the Kremlin was like, okay, well, if the Swedes are saying it's happening, we can no longer say it's not happening. And then obviously the whole Soviet Union found out. So imagine that. And that was months. Okay, that was months.
And then they would recruit people to go and work there. My uncle was almost recruited, and my brother, my dad's younger brother, and my dad persuaded him. They were paying so much money. My dad is like, don't go. Something is really fishy, and thankfully he didn't.
That was in Baku, Anna, you're saying? That was in Baku?
Yeah.
Okay.
They were recruiting all over the Soviet Union to go and work in Chernobyl. Yeah, that was what, 1985, 85 or 86.
Yeah,
Wow.
without knowing what's going on. And that is exactly how the information about Sumgait and Baku was coming out, which is essentially was not just through rumors, through people traveling, through someone saying, "Oh, if you're Armenian from other parts of the Armenian Soviet world, do not go to Azerbaijan. It's not okay there right now." And you know, through rumors, you would understand that. Yeah.
So just to put that in context really quickly, we're talking about essentially like the kind of vapor lock on information like we get out of North Korea, which is a tiny country, except the Soviet Union at its height was what, over 280 million people and encompassed 11 time zones.
Yes.
Right? Not just the 4 that we've got in the United States. So we're talking about a huge area of the earth with millions and millions of people and virtually no information coming out.
Right. At that point, right. At that point, no. I think by the end of 88, when Kirovabad happened, that's when we're like, I think everyone knew. It wasn't on the news, but no one was shocked. And then the whole 1989 was a mess for my family, and that's when majority of Armenians left Baku and the rest of Azerbaijan, and the ones with roots in Artsakh went to Artsakh, back to their grandparents. We didn't have any. We were kind of thrashing around trying to find a place, but at that point, no. But I think, in connection to your question about the diaspora not knowing. There's maybe during those years, yes, but after, no, there's no excuse not to know. The Soviet Union collapsed. A lot of us came, about 60,000 of us came to the United States. We were, in some communities welcomed, in some communities, Armenian communities not welcomed in churches. And we didn't have that habit of going to church because we only had one church, and it was a museum in the middle of Baku. And so it wasn't a practice where the Western Armenians are more used to going to churches, because the communities that genocide survivors grew up in were very welcoming, and whether it's Europe or Lebanon or Syria, definitely not Azerbaijan. So we came and we spoke Russian and we didn't go to church. And we made Russian like salads, and our dolma was different than
right.
Anna, I mean, you mentioned the communities around the world. I think we have a sizable one here in the Bay Area, right, Greg? San Francisco, of Armenians that came from Baku, I believe from 88 till, or Sumgait was 88, but then Baku 90. Could you give everybody just an overview of the history of what we're talking about? We're 32 years. The reason we're talking about this right now, one, it's great to have you back, Anna. It's really great. But then I was really thrilled to see you and Greg on an Instagram Live raising money for your foundation. That was really awesome. Yes. Maybe you guys can mention that or touch on that in a moment. But then that was the whole precursor to having you back here tonight, which is really great. And thank you again for staying up for us. But if you can give everyone that's watching and that will listen in the future, and also hopefully we can continue to share this information among the diaspora so they know more about this, just the history. And why we're talking about it now is because 32 years ago they happened in January. If you could tell everybody the dates of the Baku program and just your family's experience in what happened, if you could share that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, when people mention I'm a survivor of Baku Pogroms, I'm from Baku, and thankfully we weren't in Baku when pogroms happened. I was personally physically attacked in the summer of 1989, and something did happen to my mom. And finally, my parents are like, we have nowhere to go, but we're just going to go to Armenia. And we left on September 18th of 1989. Thankfully, because our neighborhood was kind of shielded by the train tracks. So when the demonstrations, and there were a lot of them, you could see on my Instagram feed some of the photos from the millions of people that just came out to the Lenin Square and chanted "Death to Armenians." So that those demonstrations would pass by my street. So that was for a year and a half, we were kind of hoping and praying that we weren't discovered, that there's an Armenian community. But in 1990, the Baku Pogroms were very much organized by the government, because you have a map with the crosses of where Armenian communities are. And that's why my community was discovered, my neighborhood, and my best friend's mom and grandmother were, mom was killed, the grandmother was beaten, and she later passed in Russia. So so
sorry.
yeah, thank you. I'm very thankful that that my family, my uncle was severely beaten, but nothing happened to my family where we lost anyone, thankfully.
This is a photo from your page of how big
Yeah,
these
we lived
demonstrations
maybe
were.
2 or 3 blocks away from this Lenin Square, and that's the major square in the center of Baku, and on the right side is Caspian Sea, and on that left side is the government building.
The government building is right here. Yeah.
Yeah, you see Lenin right there, but that statue was removed in the center of that building.
Yeah.
And
Right
so the Soviet tanks would come in and try to stop this, every few months. It would go demonstrations, violence, windows being broken, people sporadically being hung off of our bridge. And then nothing, because the tanks come in and everything calms down. And the tanks were the Soviet tanks, and armored vehicles and the soldiers. So it would just go back and forth and back and forth. That's why a lot of Baku Armenians stayed, because they would say, okay, that's just that next wave, and then things will calm down. But that one was the last one, and soon after the Soviet Union collapsed, and the Armenians were blamed for that too. So.
Right,
and then it broke open.
Yeah, all this preceded the first Artsakh war, right? Which maybe we could touch on. But just the dates of these programs, Wikipedia is saying January 12, 1990 through January 19, 1990. How accurate would you say is that? Is that about right?
That was about right.
Yeah.
What Aziris also mentioned is the Black January is when the tanks finally at the very end came in, and that was kind of the end of the relationship of Azerbaijan with the Soviet Union. Is they crushed a lot of those protesters, and now they are heroes to Azerbaijan, when in fact they were committing massacres against Armenians. These were murderers, and they're being commended. The massacres would continue. My aunt, my dad's sister, actually stayed in Baku because she couldn't leave. Her papers said Armenian, so if they stop you, every Soviet citizen has a passport. So it said Armenian, so she couldn't leave the apartment. Finally, when the Russians came in and took over the airport, that's when they snuck her in. And this was February. So,
Wow.
for a month, she was just in hiding, and kind of like Anne Frank, like, no sound, no nothing, pretending not there.
Wikipedia has what appears to be a grossly underreported death toll. It's saying 48 for the Human Rights Watch, and then Thomas DeWall is quoted here as 90 on the Wikipedia. What would you say was the death toll on this? It's morbid all around, but just to give everyone an idea, is there a sense of that? How many people actually were lost in this?
There's no sense of that, because who is there to claim their bodies? Also, when they were, maybe the ones that the bodies you found, but as they were putting people on boats, so there was an effort to save samurai, the Russians came in and tried to put people on boats, and these boats were operated by Azeris, and many people ended up in the sea. They were just tossed overboard. So I know one of my followers, their grandmother was put on a boat, and her son was doing something else, getting on another boat, and then they never found her. So there was a lot of unaccounted for. So it's hard to tell, and it's hard for me. People ask me this all the time, and I ask why does an Armenian government know, right? And so for the last 10 years I've been speaking about it, and people come to me because there is no such effort on the part of Armenia for the last 30 years, and absolutely no effort in collecting the type of information that you'd want, that same type of information from Artsakh. And that's why last time I talked to you, I
Right.
talked to you about the census that I did of all the
Right.
loss that Artsakh suffered.
So if I could just briefly, I want to put this in context. What I'm hearing, and because again, part of my role is to help personalize this and drive the point home and make this as salient for even a non-Armenian to understand. So, I guess what I'm hearing, and maybe you can confirm this, but here in America, in many cities across the country throughout 2020, we had many riots and many much uprising for some legitimate reasons against police brutality and for Black Lives Matter and for some really serious legitimate causes. But what I'm hearing is that this is those kinds of demonstrations were 100 times larger and involved heinous atrocities against a specific group of people, being Armenians. And in some cases were coordinated by the governments, by Azerbaijan, the government, and essentially nothing has happened because of it.
Coordinated by Azerbaijan, and we lived a few blocks away from it, so I could hear the chanting. Right, there was chanting, the death march chants. Kill Armenians, death to Armenians, and many of them would wear the black scarves or green scarves, and just women, men, whoever, and. Yes, absolutely. And then it shifted. It wasn't just kill Armenians. Armenians are out to get us because they want to secede from Azerbaijan in Artsakh. But then it was, we have to secede from the Soviet Union because Soviets are bad too. They're bringing all these tanks, and so that's why the tanks would come in. The tanks didn't come to save us. I mean, we went there and asked. My grandmother would go with other women and bring food to the soldiers and say, if they attack us, can you help us? Can you save us? And they say, no, we have strict orders not to interfere if anything happens to civilians. And so the soldiers were there to stop the fires that they burned overnight in the Lenin Square because it hurt the marble, and to stop the secession, chants. Forget the 350,000 civilians that are being murdered.
Yeah.
So and another Soviet kid here can attest to that you have to understand that what was happening was kind of juxtaposed against the crumbling and the shaking of Soviet Union. So there's chants of nationalism, anti-Kremlin things, and then in the midst of that there was a concerted effort to just kind of rid each country of its minorities, which whether it was in Georgia, it was way softer than what happened in Azerbaijan to the Armenian population. I kind of wanted to, one more thing I wanted to kind of refocus for people to understand, connecting the dots between the pogroms to Artsakh war. When we all visited Shushi, and we one day will all visit there again, I believe it.
With the correct name attached to it.
Absolutely. You saw the city in ruins, and all of us falsely thought that was because of the first war of Artsakh's liberation. When we walked through all those quarters with built, that was actually what was done in the early 20th century at the eradication of the entire Armenian quarter of Shushi. Okay,
right.
That needs to be and I remember as a history nerd, I was like, why are we not saying that in the diaspora? Because people would come out and be like, oh my God, that city is decimated through the war. No, it's
so dull.
Yeah, those skeletons and that burned, scorched earth city of Shushi that we then saw liberated, that happened in the early 20th century through the pogroms and the essentially cutting out of the Armenian population. So that's, again, we need to re-educate
I actually
ourselves.
posted that photo of recently a desolate, burnt down Armenian quarter in Shushi, and it was never rebuilt really during the Soviet times, and the Armenian population didn't live there. It became an Azeri town, and and then after the war, when it was liberated, there was no effort to restore it. And I don't blame Artsakh, because Artsakh itself was struggling financially, completely cut off from the rest of the world. But on the Armenian, by the Armenian government, that could have been restored and brought to life as it's deserved. But Shushi was loved by many Baku Armenians that came back to their roots, and was being renovated. They were paving roads. The art scene kind of grew, and so it was coming to life right before the war.
Yeah.
In fact, I was my first, when I formed the foundation, was just for tax purposes, because I wanted transparency, and I didn't want to prove to IRS that I wasn't, that wasn't the income that people were donating funds to me. So, but I formed the foundation right before the war. And the first thing that I wanted to do was do an art exhibition for all the kids across Artsakh in Shushi. And unfortunately, the first initiative that I did as a foundation was medicine and and equipment to the troops.
Yeah.
Thank you for your work, Anna. That's amazing. And hopefully we could still make that art exhibit happen for the children of Artsakh in the near future.
Yeah, there you go.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, Anna, I just want to kind of pivot a little bit. So the pogroms happened. We here, and we'll continue educating the greater public and diaspora as much as we can about the Soviet Armenian communities and their stories. But then you transitioned via Yerevan, right? There was a short stay there to America, and then kind of slowly in the early 2000s, you started your advocacy. Kind of not a reawakening, but you decided you became a strong advocate for what has gone on. And walk us through that real quick. Obviously, there's a lot to say there, but we want to be kind of curious to how did you end up to today? To how did you?
Right. For the first 22 years in U.S., I would say I did a lot of work on the international law, international criminal law. I worked at the International Criminal Court. I specialized in that in law school. And, I had some health issues where I just wanted to take a step back from that kind of grueling work, never focused on Artsakh or Armenia. I just wanted to forget and live my life after surviving, that, and then 2.5 years in blockaded Yerevan, and being mistreated for being from Baku in Yerevan itself. And that's one thing that I don't shy away from speaking about, because it's part of our history. Not everywhere, but definitely in Yerevan. There was that kind of sentiment. So when I came here, built my life, went to law school, got married, had babies, and as I got to be older and more removed from that life, I think I just needed that, distance from what happened. I met Tatul Sonens Papazian. He's our Armenian author and poet. He lives in Boston, in Watertown area. And I mentioned to him that I had this diary that I translated when I was 14. And I call it my book. And he was like, "Wow, it's the first written, it's a first-hand account that he's heard about from Baku atrocities, and so that's something that should be published." I didn't really think about it that much, but as I had children, I realized that same conflict is going on, and I have kids, and I was a kid, and so I published it, and I thought that I would never, do anything with it. It might be in the library somewhere, and then I began getting invitations. I spoke. My first event actually was speaking at the U.S. Congress, and it's December 5th, I think, 2012. So almost 10 years. That was my first public speech, and you can find it on YouTube. I believe it was posted by ANCA. And then I realized like how powerful the voice that I have is to speak on behalf of my community, and also connected to what's going on in Artsakh, and that it might happen to Artsakh too if you don't pay attention, both diaspora and the international community. And so not first, but later on I was embraced by the diaspora, and later on by Artsakhis who learned about my work here. And as I was growing more and on social media, there was humanitarian projects that people trusted me enough to have me implement. And so it was kind of, the first 5 years was definitely more political. My husband and I had the state of Maine recognize Artsakh's independence. And then the last 5 years, I would say, focus more on humanitarian efforts, while at the same time bringing awareness to Baku atrocities, for example, planting for 30th anniversary, planting a forest in the memory of Baku 30th anniversary. But that's very interesting. It's been 2 years, and I was invited to speak at the parliament, which was the first time Armenian government actually had a Baku Armenian speak about Baku atrocities.
Wow.
And but there's no monument about Baku atrocities anywhere in Armenia. Still, there's a Sumgait, a Khachkar for Sumgait, but that's it. So putting that forest and having a Khachkar for that was important to me. But I invited, this was January 2020. I invited the government to do kind of ribbon cutting, blessing of the forest in Tallinn, Armenia, and they didn't attend. So before the war, there's for 30 years, present and past administrations, there was an effort to not speak about it. And in many times it was politically driven, but I think for majority of the time we were not considered Armenian enough, or we were not considered a problem anymore because we were spread all over the world. An inconvenient problem.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, Anna, why you think that is, that it's not discussed or recognized within Armenia. I mean, you just touched on a little bit of that. It's just a little bit puzzling.
I guess the question I would have, Anna, is, I mean, you think that it was only partially politically driven? I mean, what would the rest of it be? Because it seems to me, and maybe I'm wrong, but it seems to me that there is a long-standing fear of really showcasing our history because of the cost of doing so to our neighbors could be inflammatory to them.
Well, and also, I mean, I was called a Baku whore at 11 years old. So,
by Armenian?
By an Armenian. Yes. I was called a Turk in Yerevan for 2.5 years. So, I draw my conclusions by my experiences. So, I think there was that, and I also think there was deliberate political moves to, when I was geared to become more active after my first few presentations, I was told by our Artsakh government, maybe you shouldn't be talking about Baku because then Azeris will claim, that they want to come back to Lachin. And so, there's all kinds of subcurrents that happened the last 30 years. And then at one point, we just got really comfortable. We want Artsakh. We have our Artsakh in the borders. Our international community will understand it. We're just, kind of playing along and not really advancing ourselves because we're in a good spot. And we can line our pockets as we're in power. And so, it continues.
Yeah, as bad as things are right now with the current leadership, obviously this is not, there needs to be a little bit of finger pointing as well to the past 30 years. Yes. And as a matter of fact, so there were like 3 centers of Armenian intelligent activity in Soviet Union, which was Tiflis, Baku, and Yerevan. And Yerevan was kind of the victor of the 3 of those. We were all dissipated, and Yerevan kind of is the next chosen center of intellectual activity. And in my opinion, they kind of fell short of that calling. where the diaspora is so Western oriented, Western Armenia oriented. I don't think you guys, and there's no blame to you, were able to notice that, you know. But there was a lot of ethnocentricity coming out of Yerevan. As a Tbilisi, I can say that. Again, we in Arach Media can now kind of try to usher in that move forward to unify. We as Armenians have constantly the ability to, like, well, Richard, your family is from from Syria and Western Armenia. I'm more Tiflis Armenian, and in reality, it's such a ridiculous conversation.
Yeah,
but it shaped Anna's childhood. It also shaped mine as well.
But I think that it's funny. People are like, oh, but you do so much for Armenia. Why wouldn't you be this angry person? Because I can talk about it, but I can still do things because I am doing things because Armenia to me is more than just my personal experience with Armenia.
That's right.
Armenia is so much bigger than that.
But Anna, to your point, I mean, and Greg, to yours as well. I think that division amongst ourselves and how we you're an Urfatsi, you're a Yerevansi, you're whatever it is, we divide ourselves. And I don't know what your experience has been, but I've certainly had the experience of, well, you're not Armenian enough, or you're not. I mean, that's unfortunately too common.
Yeah.
And that exact same thing happened to Artsakhs during the war and after the war. And I know for a fact that this happened to people I know, that they were yelled at and ridiculed in Yerevan and mocked for their, dialect and told to go back to where they came from, literally. And I would say the same for Sunniktsis. One of the things that I didn't bring up is on the way to Artsakh. I stopped in Goris for the election of the mayor that was jailed. And the thing that I kept hearing is that there's this deliberate effort to paint Sunik as very dangerous by Yerevan, and so that the diaspora does not go down to Sunik and Goris and Khanzarask, and so it's economically isolated, and also I think psychologically impacted by that. So there's this deliberate distinction, that Sunniktsis and Artsakhtsis are somehow different. I mean, to kind of close my comment is, but it's the same to Gyumri Armenians, it's really kind of tragic. And when people say, oh, you're a Bakvetsi, okay, yeah, but my grandfather is from Khanzarask. They are so stunned, like, wow, you're one of us. We're all one of us.
Well, yeah, for sure. I mean, it's funny how when we see each other on the street, or when we see a name on a TV or a movie or whatever, we spark with pride. And yet there is these bizarre divisions where we point at each other. I think, and before we go any further, before we start getting any hate mail about, how we're downing our own culture, I would like to just offer up that, in the interest of loving our culture, you have to call yourselves out and call each other out and be clear about things in order to make any sort of progress at all. And I don't want to move through the world with anything less than clarity. And, because that's the way you get to truth.
Bolor Nuin Hayanenk. We are all Armenian. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean
but that was one of the deciding factors for me when I published my diaries that I wrote as a child. That the commentary about the treatment of Armenians from Baku in Yerevan, I said I didn't at the time. I was very terrified of hate mail. I was just a private person with two little toddlers, and I made a conscious decision. I had to keep that part in, because if we start taking pieces of our history out and don't speak about it openly and comfortably like this, without hating Armenia, then we're no better than Naziris who are changing.
For sure,
absolutely.
Anna, I think,
sorry.
Real quick, I was going to say, I think you give a really perfect example of someone that rises above all of that, right? By the work that you do, despite that experience you had. We've seen it still with Artsakh coming back into Armenia, into Yerevan. We saw it with Syrian Armenians, right? They were mistreated as minorities, if you will, in Yerevan when they left Syria. And it just continues to happen, but hopefully we can somehow get past this together.
And you know, the new generation, I mean,
Yeah.
despite some commentary from the current administration, you know, they're fairly young and they still make those types of comments. But the new generation, you know, the college, the university students that I've met are incredibly worldly, you know, and I think the internet generation is well beyond that type of hatred.
So hopefully, I think we are turning a page. It's a hard way of turning a page, but I'm so happy that we can have these talks, that we can kind of enlighten. Obviously, being from Tiflis, I knew the story of Baku, and actually, you know, being from San Francisco Bay Area, you know the story of Baku Armenians, because they're such a big part of our communities here. As a matter of fact, Richard lives in Sacramento. There's actually a very large Artsakh community there. When he did a what do you call
it? Right? Shaoman community.
Shaoman from a very particular part of Artsakh, which is of course
under Azeri control.
Yeah, under Azeri control. So we must continue learning our stories. We must know them because we make up a big web of who we are in the Armenian nation. Yerevan is part of that.
Absolutely, and there's so many Yerevansis that helped. You know, majority of my family in Armenia is in Yerevan, from Yerevan, and my grandfather was, you know, grew up in Yerevan. So, you know, I don't separate myself from Yerevan at all. I think that those sentiments come from the elite in Yerevan, and we need to call them out. How do you make change? You confront it. You know, you don't hide from it. And another thing that I wanted to say is those types of things that are continuing. You know, how we disregarded the history of Baku Armenians, and it happened to Artsakhs, and, you know, disregarded Shushi and not build it up, and now it's happening to Sunik. You know, I'm fundraising right now for a renovation of a school because a portion of it is not heated, and the government is telling them, well, it's too big to heat. You know, so it has, you know, 1960s, 70s rotting Soviet hardwood floors that I'm trying to renovate to build up Sunik so we don't lose it either, you know, so people don't leave. And that's what's happening. You know, economically isolated, fear for their lives, being right next to the border posts, and not protected. There's absolutely no support from the military on those border posts, and they're kind of fending for themselves. So
let's pause right there. Can you and this is very good because we don't know of many people that have traveled there. Can you repeat what you just said? So Sunik, in parts,
the border posts are, you know, there are posts, right? So there's so Sunik and Artsakh were touching, and now it's Azerbaijan, and there are no border posts. So because there was no border, it was just one Armenian land, and now there's a border, and there's people that, you know, shooting, and kind of moving the line, the Soviet border line, and the villagers are kind of there protecting themselves. Some of the posts, the photos that I've seen, you know, are really incredibly, you know, like, I don't know, 5th century, you know, digging a hole in the ground and that, calling that a post, where Azeris are building it up like crazy.
So so this entire section used to be, and this is what Montem Elkon importantly mentioning, how important Artsakh was a shield to Armenia. So this entire part of Sunik, not to mention this, which is Nakhichevan as well, that's aggressive too. But this area is now exposed totally to Azerbaijan and Azeri aggression, with minimum Armenian, from what you're saying, you know, countering to that.
Yeah, and another thing that I will say is that when the Soviet Union collapsed, a lot of the factories closed. So the main bread, you know, the main way to make a living was to have cattle and cows and horses, And so they would take them to the Artsakh side.
Yeah, they would graze
Um,
in Artsakh essentially.
They would graze in Artsakh because the fields, right? And they were it was warm, even in the winter, they could eat there, you feed there. And now they can't do that. So they're losing their life's work and moving because you can't do that in the mountains, really.
Yeah.
There's not enough food.
Right.
Oops.
Yeah, Anna, thank you so much. Thank you so much. You know, as we look to wrap our conversation tonight, I think it's already well past 1 a.m. Eastern time. If you could just share with everybody an update about your foundation, what you're working on right now. I think you've touched on it here and there, and really how people can help, how people can contribute, how we can help, and then we can look ahead.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate you guys staying up for me because you know, some of us have bedtimes.
It's not too late here yet. Yeah.
So the foundation is a way for me to do charitable work transparently. You know, most of my work is really highlighting what's going on in the region, like these types of stories going down to the region and bringing it back. So that to me is more important. Calling my senators, because I think the humanitarian impact that I'm making is small, but it helps everyday people. So, you know, we renovated the bathrooms in this school a few years ago with Paros Foundation, and now I'm renovating their auditorium hall where they graduate and have all the fun things that the kids like to do. And that to me was kind of, I had to help Sunik somehow, and helping the kids in the school really speaks to me. But I am working on something for Artsakh in 2022. I haven't really finalized the plans on that, but I am working on both Artsakh and Sunik.
Amazing.
And my book is actually coming out in Armenian. Interestingly, all this time I was advocating, and people always ask, why is it not in Armenian? Well, because I'm using it as a message to the international community. So having it in English and in Russian was important. But Armenian, it sounds like certain pockets of the population would benefit from reading what happened to Baku Armenians in Armenia.
And the book we were showing earlier is available on Amazon. We're linking to it as well. It's an amazing read. You should definitely pick it up. Read a memoir of an actual, pogrom survivor, someone that has seen what was coming to them in that horrendous time, and the transition and the life of a refugee. Can I ask you the name Nowhere? Right? How did that speak to you? Maybe it sounds a little obvious, but what was in the title?
So when we were looking to leave Baku, there's so many different ways we can describe about how impossible it is to move within the Soviet Union. But we had to leave, otherwise we would die. But we had nowhere to go, and no one wanted us. Russians didn't want us. We were called blacks, by Russians. Yerevansis didn't really want us because there was an influx of the earthquake survivors, and here we are missing Baku, like Baku's an enemy, like they didn't. So there was nowhere for us to go. The only place that wanted us was America, and that was kind of, that feeling. I think that because I was writing it, I didn't really change the language. It's still a language of a child. And
well, I would also say that it's the silver lining is that at that place in America's history, America was a lot more welcoming of refugees and people from other countries. Today, yes, not as much as it was then.
Absolutely. And I think 9/11 had a lot to do with it, and all kinds of political movements. But I I blame Sarah Palin.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
She
Good reason.
she kind of started the whole
started-
thing.
Or I
Yeah.
should blame McCain. That's right.
All of it.
But
all of it.
Yeah, I blame McCain too, but that's a whole other. We can do a whole show on that alone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, since we're talking about McCain, he had openly expressed regret, didn't he? I think he had before he passed.
yeah,
I
he
think he did.
shot himself in the foot with that one.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I would say that absolutely it was Bush senior administration actually that made that possible, and it was only Baku Armenians that were allowed. And I mean, it took 2 years to go through the process of being selected, and
Right.
Wow.
and we thought for sure we weren't going to, because a lot of people we knew that weren't. And you could see the difference in the life of a Baku Armenian living in Yerevan and one that's living in the United States at 32 years later. And it's, it's day and night. So, so I'm very lucky, and I can't just sit idle and be that diaspora that could have helped me when I came here. And
Well
so
said.
I'm trying to be a diasporan that my grandparents would be proud of.
Thank you. That is amazing. This is
You definitely are, Anna. Thank you.
You
so
know, and
much.
your statements, I think, are on that same path of trying to do the best we can to protect our family's legacy.
Yeah.
So good job. Well done.
Yeah.
Thank
Anna,
you so much, guys.
Yeah,
You are
one
my
thing-
favorite.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind of you. We're really so happy to have you. You're one of our favorites too. A quick thing, a big thing happened in your life. Very recently, it was this month, you were elected the first female president of what's the city? I'm trying to get it right. I want to make sure I get it right. Hold on. Westbrook, Maine City Council, right?
Yes, I don't know
Okay.
what happened. I was very surprised. It was,
That's
I've been on the
amazing.
council for 6 years, and I consider myself to be kind of a, first immigrant for sure, but one of very few women. And at the time, for there were some women that were on a council and then left, and then I was the only woman on a council for the last 2 years.
Wow.
And the majority are Democrats, and as a Democrat, they felt that they should be represented by a Democrat, because at the time the president was independent and very leaning to the right. And it was time for change. I just didn't think it was me, but they thought it would be very good for the city to have a first female president and first immigrant to lead the council and
That's amazing.
reach
And-
across both aisles, 4 aisles.
And I could imagine the probably first Armenian president of city council as well.
Yeah, I bet. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I mean,
At least Westbrook, probably, right? Yeah.
you'd be
Well,
surprised. Westbrook is a bedroom community of Portland, Maine.
Yeah.
And Portland was a huge Armenian community back during the Armenian genocide and the years
Yeah.
after. That's where most of the settlers came. Worcester and Portland.
Mhm.
And so there's a huge street of all Armenian shops so they're descended. So maybe one of them was a council president. I don't know.
Right.
I didn't get to spend much time in Worcester. And had I been able to make the connection, had more daytime there, I would have certainly gone and explored. But I did want to bring up a little anecdote here. I don't know how much time you get to spend there, but I have to tell you that I think the Portland Head Light is one of the most beautiful lighthouses I've ever seen. And in one day, I was able to spend the morning at that lighthouse, fly home to California, and then go to Santa Cruz and go to the Santa Cruz Lighthouse. So I went 2 different lighthouses on 2 different coasts in the same day.
Wow.
And then you woke up and went to Florida and found one there, right?
I'm a road warrior, but I'm not that tough.
Amazing.
Yes, it's very beautiful. And in fact, I'm one, unlike some other Mainers, I try to show my kids, Maine. I think that, go to those types of destinations that you used to, like driving by the lighthouse and not stopping like that. No, you have to
Right.
stop there.
Yeah.
Well, that's one of the fantastic things about this country is that you can be from somewhere else, come here and become an American and live an American life. And it's actually the first country on earth that was designed on paper to be what it is. And it's pretty amazing. So, I mean,
well, and it's based on the idea of what it should be, right? And it's not based on your cultural identity, religious identity, and so that's why, you know, I grew up. I was 14 when I came here. I still think of myself as you know, an Armenian, obviously from Baku, but I very much American in the way that I approach, you know, being a mom or being a wife and having a career at the same time. And it's really hard for my relatives sometimes to understand that, like, oh, and here she has a political career. Like, when does she have time to have that garden and knit all those things? But you can do all those things and be proud of who you are and still come home and be with your kids. So
I mean, and we owe you a lot of gratitude for doing that, for staying up with us, for educating the diaspora about your experience, for enlightening and making sure that we understand what the Baku and Azeri Armenian, or Armenians of Azerbaijan, that's a better way of describing what their story is and was, and most importantly also for what you do and continue to do for Sunik and Artsakh right now. And we want to kind of continuously invite you to have these conversations with us.
Thank you. And I appreciate all the support. And, you know, I know that a lot of your viewers follow me on my social media and do donate. So I appreciate that connection. You have you know,
by the way, we do have links to your social media accounts as well as the foundation. And Greg is going to post the link to the book. So everything, if you are watching this on Facebook right now, and even afterwards, you'll be able to look at the links inside the feed. And if you're watching this on YouTube later, come to Facebook and check it there. So that's probably the way to do it.
Yeah, and but for now, we want to say thank you and let you let you go.
Get some sleep.
Let me go to sleep. I haven't eaten really.
No. Is it a city council meeting? City council meeting? No.
No, city council.
No. One thing that people don't know, it's a well hidden secret, is that I am, well, I don't know if that's a secret, but I'm a banker. I'm an attorney. I run a risk management department of a local bank and protecting our consumers. You didn't know that?
I know I did, but I just want to emphasize how
it's amazing. It's amazing. Yeah.
There's always a new addition to the house that we didn't know about. Jeez.
Well, and it's so funny because I had to tell people that when I was in Armenia several times, like, you know, I can come and do a seminar on risk management at this and this university if you want. And they were like looking at me like, why would you do that? You know, why would you talk about Artsakh? Oh, because that's what I do for a living.
Right. Well, you know, you're in good company. You've got 3 other overachievers on the line with you right now.
We try.
Thank you, Anna, and
you go into news or politics, and I know you had a couple questions for me on that, but you know.
Yeah. And I mean, well, this is a conversation that we could have. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
I mean. Well, Greg, maybe you guys we can.
There
are things. Go, but we appreciate that. Yeah.
I mean, you are vocal and you're critical. You have your opinion on what's happening, and obviously your opinion is steeped in a lot of facts and understanding. But it is there's a lot of very, very. I mean, weird is no longer the word anymore to reply. It's now some kind of an all-out, I don't know, dumpster fire in terms of policies in Armenia. There's also now a major resignation from a foreign nation, not even from within the government, meaning while he was out of the country, whatever that means, we can kind of uncouple that. Somebody that you knew or know closer, the current ombudsman about to step out and is being replaced by, I don't know, the resumes of all of My Steps Foundation's replacements are laughable at best. You know what I mean? That's the best way I can say. But everyone is really always unprepared for their jobs, or rather prepared to, I don't know, decimate Armenia. what can we say? Oh, our prime minister saying that we want to normalize ties with Turkey with no preconditions, and also making sure that, kind of alluding to the fact that the Armenian genocide and the Western Armenian part is kind of not Yerevan's focal point. Care to comment on that?
That was quite a bit, Greg, but you summarized it well.
Yeah,
Summarized it well.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you kind of how I approach these types of things in the past. When I was asked to comment on internal Armenian politics, I always said I'm not an Armenian citizen. My focus is Azerbaijan and the atrocities that are being committed against Artsakhs, the soldiers and the boys on the posts, and the type of propaganda that they're spewing. So my focus for the first 8 years has been focus on Azerbaijan and the propaganda. Now I can no longer do that because it's affecting the lives of the people inside Armenia and Artsakh. What's happening in the country internally. Arman Tatoyan is a good friend, and he has worked day and night for the last 2 years after, during the war and after the war. And I mean, he's done a great job even before the war, but, ultimate professional and personally attacked by Armenian government for doing his job.
By the current administration, correct? Current administration.
Absolutely, current administration. He's apolitical. He's
right.
When there was an attempt to take his budget out of his control, which is you can't do that. You have to have an ombudsman that has an independent, self kind of controlled budget process. I had wives of certain ministers attack me in private messages for supporting Arman Tatoyan and mentioning that they should. I mean, these are people that I don't know these women. I mean, I don't know this person. Why is the minister of this and this attacking me?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where it's coming from. So like the amount of trolls, the amount of rhetoric against any dissent, is troubling. I have never been attacked by any Armenian the first 8 years I've done it. I'm being attacked personally now, not as openly as Azeris do, but pretty close. And so I think that the presidency, office of the president was, from what I hear, kind of the last island of dissenters that they didn't feel that they were attacked. Whether or not he was in on it, I don't know. I'm not going to get into it. Who he belonged to in terms of loyalty and alliance, I don't know. And frankly, I don't care because he did very little to help Armenia. But the people that worked for him weren't, didn't feel that they were targeted the way that in other areas were, and in many ways harassed out of jobs and threatened. So him leaving was very convenient. Obviously, this information was available to them before. I don't know why they didn't act on it then. All of a sudden, it's, he's resigning, and he shouldn't have been a president to begin with, because he was it's just so absurd. And I don't buy it. I mean, who buys it? No one does. It's just a show.
And it feels like Armenia's news cycle, like, there are things that we would have been like shocked with 3 years ago, and now it's becoming daily almost, and it's
a Trump effect.
It's a Trump effect for sure. Yeah, it's when absolutely.
Anna, could you elaborate, if you wouldn't mind, on what you meant by you don't buy it? What don't you buy about the president's situation? If you wouldn't mind me asking.
I don't buy that. I don't know why he resigned or whether he was forced to, but all of a sudden they're smearing of him that they just discovered he was a citizen of some country, and I don't buy that they didn't know that for the last 2 years.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Yeah, that seems unlikely that they wouldn't know that.
Right.
Yeah, or I'm sure that if he was trying to resolve it, it was obviously known by others. So um, yeah, I think it was very much staged. And as far as the, you mentioned the people that have their resumes are not lining up to their responsibilities. With the ombudsman's office, yeah, I mean it's a yes woman, yes man kind of mentality.
Yeah.
Which
And
which is
when
the
the
track record, right, for Pashinyan, who he's appointing. Not
It's
to cut
very,
you off,
yeah.
sorry, but go ahead. Yeah,
yeah
yeah,
yeah and it's something he said he wanted to appoint someone to the presidency to from his party for harmony. That's
Armenian.
not democracy, that's dictatorship.
right,
When
right,
you want no dissent, and that to you is harmony. I mean,
Right. Right.
I met the man several times, and and I also met the ambassador of Armenia to US, Lilith Makuns. She
yeah,
knows me personally. I've been public about how I felt like she was not qualified, nothing personally against her.
right,
But she's
Not
just not
qualified.
qualified, and that's like over and over and over again.
right. I mean, there's a
Uh,
lot of positives, right? Having a female ambassador, a younger, but yeah, she's not qualified, right?
I
You have
know.
someone that was extremely qualified before, and now he's been reassigned to the UK, and then
yeah.
now we have her. So anyway,
And
sorry.
I mean, and diplomacy is not a hobby.
Mhm.
Diplomacy is an
That's
art
right.
form. It's
Well
a
said.
discipline. You have to, and I have so many friends in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that are just superb at what they do, and it's just heartbreaking to kind of see the ministry be kind of defunct. My first stop every time I was in Armenia would to visit my friends at MFA. I don't do that anymore. I don't know anything anymore. And that's one thing that I noticed much more. I think the first time I went back to Armenia in May, I was still shell shocked after the war. But this time I think I was a little more aware of the things I've noticed that were different. And one of the things that was different is nothing is the same, both in Artsakh and in Armenia. In Artsakh, much more so. It felt to me as if I was paraded through a country that, that these things that were happening were just a show. So I couldn't take photos. I was, it was just strange, and I was just happy to see my friends that were there. But other than that, frankly, I just felt like completely helpless. That I couldn't do anything to help them, and no one was doing anything to help them.
That's
I mean, yeah, well said. Yeah, thanks for that insight, because
Yeah, yeah.
obviously someone that was close to some people. You visited it multiple times. There are some connection on my side as well, but I'll comment on that later. But I completely echo what you're talking about. It's all just weird, and it's all just at a time when we need to be all strong, meaning they and Yerevan have to have their A game in terms of the diplomacy. It just, like, the messaging out of there is really, really, really.
Well, yeah, a couple quick points on that. I mean, you're right, Anna. Diplomacy is not it's not some quick transient thing. It's not best served by a Twitter feed. It's best served by a library and a wealth of knowledge. That's the way that you do things, is by having a position that's steeped in knowledge and bring that to the conversation. I mean, I think I could speak for us when I say that Greg brings a lot of that to us, and we try and share that with the diaspora. I would also say that it's best served with calm, focused minds, but that doesn't mean that we're always looking for tranquil waters. I mean, friction is where pearls get made. Pressure is where diamonds get made. And when we always strive for no dissent and have things calm, we might not make any forward progress. So I think there's been I would say that I've experienced a large campaign within the Armenian community of stuffing down information so that we can appear to have a unified front, but really we don't. And that's why I think it's important to have these kinds of conversations so we can break them open, we can get to the truth, and then we can forge a path forward.
And the word unity is so overused. Anytime you disagree with anyone, it's Anna, we have to be united. You shouldn't be saying these things.
Yeah, but united behind what?
Yeah. Well, sometimes the
united under what?
Well, sometimes the way unity has it been told to me, it means shut up. Like,
That's right. That's right.
Yes, it's another way of saying that, and I say that. I mean, publicly on my page, I say, "Are you telling me to shut up?" Because that's what it sounds
good.
Like. And yes, we had unity during the war, and that was completely, the rug was pulled from under us. I don't believe that unity anymore. I don't believe that. I don't buy that. Because, like you said, what are we united? There's no national interest that is being,
there's no agenda
defined for us.
Right.
Yeah, Anna, before we let you go, it's almost 2 a.m. now, Eastern time. But was there any, just to wrap it up from our last conversation in June, was there any further update on the census project you had?
Yes,
yes, it's done.
It's done.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So that's
awesome.
why I was there in October. So the census project itself, so it's done in a way that, in a sense that the information is collected.
Yes.
So what we did is we hired between 250 and 300 social workers. We trained them. Some of them were new to social work, and in fact, our Artsakh didn't have social workers. So we kind of established that start for social work in Artsakh, and collected information about 95% of Artsakhi's psychological, medical, property loss, your psychological state of mind. Have you received any? 35 pages of questions, and it was, to benefit Arman Tatoyan and his office, to Ombudsman of Artsakh, to benefit Ministry of Social Affairs, both Armenian and Artsakh, to be able to assist these families. And for history, right? We don't have that data on Baku Armenians, and I wanted to make sure that we had it.
Amazing.
And so the data was collected, and we had a final report from the social work side done. Now, the thing that I'm trying to finalize this year, and I don't know if that's possible, is do a legal report on the type of things that the data speaks to. And so far, I think people are burned out, and there's no funds for that. And I frankly, just burned out on fundraising. For the census. The census cost my foundation, with the generous donations of all my supporters, about $85,000. Wow. And so the legal report is costly as well. And so I'm trying to find people that see the value in spelling out what occurred in Artsakh from legal perspective, for historical perspective, and so potentially trying to finish that in 2023. But itself, the collection of data is done, cleaned up in terms of making sure there are no double, entries, making sure that all the data points were completed. So it's been scrubbed, it's been finalized, it's being used by the government of Armenia now, and it's over 35,000 families, that were interviewed in person. Just think about that.
That's
crazy.
Monumental work. I'll be honest with you.
It really is.
Sometimes my mind can't comprehend the gravity of
scale.
And the scale. So again, it's another echo and the need to go to your foundation and donate, because I think you do good work. You do good work, and you do important work.
The link's on the feed. It's on our link tree as well. Go ahead, Greg. Sorry,
David. We must let Anna go.
Yes, of course. Yeah, thank you so much, Anna. Thank you so much. And
That's what
forgive me,
happened
like
when I
you may
went
have
live
touched
with
on
you.
it when I had some technical difficulties. I was booted out by my own laptop. So you may
Yeah,
have touched on some of that when I was kicked out. So
yeah.
So
forgive me.
Greg and I did a live, and I think went over 2 hours. So
Yeah.
it's always a bad combination for us. We're always keep talking. I don't know.
I mean, because there's a wealth of info and there's a wealth of to-dos, all right? And I think our listeners should be very much encouraged by all the things that we've been discussing to I don't know, do something, donate for sure,
Yes.
and educate yourself about the different Armenian communities of the both Western and Eastern Armenia, and understand that Baku, Tiflis, Ganja Armenians, we have a very, very, very interesting stories. Artsakh Armenians, and we're all interconnected. And then we have a connection to the West as well, Western Armenia. And, we're one big Armenian nation. End of story. That's it.
Yeah.
And the last thing I would say is quit using Anatolia. Quit using Anatolia. It's the Armenian Highland. Remember that.
Armenian Highland.
Matthew
Yes.
Karanian.
Yeah.
Anyway,
And it's sushi.
and
Yeah.
sushi, that's
Yes.
right.
Yeah, of course.
Right.
All right, I'm gonna go
Well-
because then my boss is not gonna be happy with my performance.
No.
tomorrow.
Okay.
All right.
Mariki
All right.
Shesh.
If you give me an address, I'll FedEx you some coffee.
Oh my gosh, I need it. Coffee's getting expensive. All
I
right.
know.
Like,
No.
a lot of things. Yeah.
Talk to you later, guys. Bye bye.
Take care.
Take care.
Good
Bye,
night.
Anna. Good night. Yeah, she's great. She's so
Yeah,
great.
fantastic. Gosh, she was
David,
so
no.
gracious with her
No,
time.
David.
So gracious with her
David.
time. And I really want to thank everybody who's continued to stay with us. We still got a tremendous number of viewers right now, and I want to honor their time as well.
Yeah.
Folks, oftentimes I'm asked, what can we do? It's right now we seem to be in a position when messaging is, I want to say by design, is very chaotic. The call to action seemingly is chaotic. Identify those people that you want to support. And by the way, Anna is one person that I've identified I will support. Charchav, the gentleman that we talked to from Artsakh.
I almost
I
brought
think-
him up, but we didn't have time. I
Yeah.
almost brought him up.
What I think, and by the way, Anna also actually kind of took notice, is because of, again, there's like a chain link of people that you trust. And if you trust
Sure.
Arach Media and we tell you we trust these entities, then it behooves you to donate, spread information about these
Share the word.
people.
Yeah.
Make sure, because that is our kind of grassroots effort. So when you come to me, David, Rich, or whoever, and go like, hey man, what can we do? There's no grand national strategy. Of course, there is something that we would love to do that's explosive, right? but also there's also something that we can do today, right now, financial, and something that isn't financial, which is word of mouth. Spread information about Anna Astvatsaturian's foundation. Go listen to the live. By the way, Charchav does Shant. Charchav Esjan does lives every other day or so from Martuni. Sorry.
Yeah, one last night.
Yeah. And support his foundation. Support what he does, because this is impactful on the ground right away. Anyways, I'm done. David, I can't do a million news articles right now, dude.
No, we won't.
Let me just give you the highlights really quick, and then we can decide what we're going to really dive into, if anything at all. We've got President Sarkisian who is resigning.
He resigned already.
Resigned.
Let's just.
Let me finish my sentence, Ara.
Resigned. But go ahead, man. Go ahead.
Ankara is making some claims that Pashinyan may visit. There's also talk that Pashinyan is saying that the Armenians may be willing to normalize ties with Turkey with no preconditions. So there's a lot of kind of craziness going on from the Armenian side, and I don't know, it's a little bit weird. We have more news coming out of Armenia. Of course, the big elephant in the room is what's going to happen if Russia and Ukraine really go at it. We've got a little bit of news coming out of the United States. We have a very important memorial to talk about too, right? And there's a couple of little positive things to talk about. So I don't know. What do you guys want to do?
I'm telling you what. I'm gonna flip reverse here. Let's talk about the new head coach of the Armenian basketball
Well,
team.
look
You want to start with positive, Greg?
Yeah, we'll start.
Oh, start
David,
with the
go.
positive. That's like saying when people ask, "Hey, do you want good news or bad news first?" Don't you usually go with the bad news first, or do you go with the good news
Oh
first?
man, there's so much
Alright.
bad. It's
I
bad.
guess there's no
Then you
right
know
or wrong.
what? Then you know what? I'm gonna make the call. I'm gonna back my bro. Here, check it. Ta-da! All right.
All
So
right, cool.
where we at, Haas?
Well, here, the really cool thing about this, by the
Don't
way,
switch gears on us, David.
I was just going to talk about it. Can I talk about it? Can I
Oh,
talk
yeah,
about it?
yeah.
Being the big NBA nut that I am, season ticket holder, Golden State Warriors since 2009, 2008, excuse me. And then, anyway,
Warrior.
Chase Center founding member, Rex Kalamian has been in the NBA as an assistant coach for decades. He's an assistant coach on the Detroit Pistons right now. What's really cool about this, if you guys see who is posting this, it is Adrian Wojnarowski. He is the top, you could argue, the top NBA reporter in the world. He is ESPN's top NBA reporter, and he posted this on his social media, on his Instagram and on his Twitter with millions of followers. And if you guys see what it says, he mentions Rex Kalamian. He also calls out that his parents were his grandmother escaped the Armenian genocide as a teenager to come to the United States, and both of his parents are Bronx-born Armenian Americans. He is a descendant of survivors of the Armenian genocide. He calls that out in this post. And what the news
awesome.
is really awesome. The news is Rex Kalamian was just recently named the new head coach of the Armenian national team for basketball. So the Armenia does have a basketball team, national basketball team. They're not very good. I'll have to look up where we rank on the.
Let me just say this. This is what happens when we keep telling our story. This is what happens when we keep making friends and we develop allyships. This is what happens when we keep pushing forward.
Yes.
That's what happens. People call it
really
out,
amazing.
they recognize it, and they say so.
He really did. And Rich, I'm glad you pointed that out, because I was really so happy and amazed to see this news break. And then I'm reading the tweet and I'm reading the Instagram. And then all of a sudden, to my surprise, I see he mentions the descendant of Armenian genocide survivors. Because like Woj, he didn't have to say that. Did Woj have to say that? Not at all. He could have made this announcement, which is saying, "Oh, Rex Kalamian, the assistant coach of the Detroit Pistons, was named Armenia's national team head coach."
But we will get to a point one day where that is not the byline or the undercurrent of the discussion about us as Armenians. We will be more than the victims. We will be more than the survivors. We will be recognized for more than that. But that doesn't mean that we can let up right now, because I don't care how many times Biden says it. If he's only done it once anyway.
Well,
I want policy, and I want definitive action.
Right. And since you brought up Biden, to me, his words don't mean anything unless he stops waiving Section 907 of the Freedom of Sport
Joe
Act.
Byron.
Yeah. So, and if Biden or whoever, now that Biden said it, who knows? Will the next president say it? We have yet to find out. But then if they do they still waive 907? If they could, okay. Anyway, we're going on a whole tangent here. But yes, thank you guys, and thank you for sharing that and for allowing me to give that context.
Also, hold on. Let's just stay in that groove for a second. We're gonna put. Don't worry, everybody. All the important news. We're gonna put links up. Don't worry about that. That's all gonna happen. But it's
a lot of it's been touched on. We touched on a lot of it with.
I ran through it.
Yeah, Greg, you did. You did.
No way.
Great job summarizing. You did.
All right. So on that note, come on, where did it go? Come on, click, boom. Okay, so 6 athletes to represent Armenia to win the Winter Olympics,
which start February 3rd, next Thursday, a week from today. They start, I believe, or is it Tuesday? It is exactly a week from today.
That's pretty amazing. I still remember the opening ceremony from the last Beijing Olympics and how it was terrifyingly perfect.
So that's pretty cool. There's 4 skiers. There's cross-country skiers, and there's figure skaters. Go ahead, Greg. Sorry.
And Richard, sorry, if you can scroll down a little bit. We're not going to touch upon it, but top left, and thanks to the Anna Kachikian of the Armenian Report, that's Nikol Pashinyan coughing COVID on another reporter that he is being interviewed by.
That shows you how much regard he has for anything. But whatever, that's a whole other thing. However, on another positive note, check it.
This is pretty cool.
Oh yes, thank
Henri,
you.
the video.
Oh
He
my
scored.
God!
Greg,
Yes.
what can you tell us and our viewers about who
I
he
mean, so
scored
this
against?
is FC Roma. This is our man Mkhitaryan. I mean, he's definitely in the Steph Curry years of his
He's
career.
33. He just turned 33, I believe. Yeah, he's exactly
Yeah.
the
So
same age.
actually, in soccer, he's coming into the late 30s. That would be in soccer years, and still pulling one of the best goals of the Italian Premier League, which is amazing.
And now,
I want to see, and actually the war and everything has taken our focus away from some. There are some cool things happening on the Armenian sports front,
yes,
and maybe as we move along further into February, we can start touching upon that without letting go of the more important things that
of
we
course,
need
of course.
to inform our community of, such as Nicole Pashinyan wanting to go to
And
Turkey.
by the way, I'm gonna put it out there. I'm gonna put it out there right now.
Boy.
I am going to, we're going to try to get Rex Kalamian on the show. I'm going to put that out there. I'm working on that. So anyway, Greg, quick thing for context for those of us that are not soccer knowledgeable.
Yes.
Football.
That goal against that team.
Yeah.
Is that any significance against that team? Was that a really good team? Was it like?
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's playing at the top tier of the what do you call it, of the Italian.
Right.
Serie A, which is the main.
Right. Who he scored against, Juventus or whatever. Like,
Juventus is not Juventus.
Juventus. Excuse me.
That is yeah. So there's like the top 5 of the Italian. There's like the 2 teams in Milan, Juventus, as you said, and
excuse me, guys.
Yeah, FC Roma being part of that, and there's also Napoli as well down south in Naples. So those are like the big teams of there's others, but those are the big ones. Juventus is probably the leader in their championship, like ring count, if you want to say. It's the quote unquote the Boston Celtics of the Italian soccer.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah.
Did they win that?
Now I don't know how good they are this year, although I could guess they're just they're top 5 every year, right? So yeah. That is definitely, that goal went into the Italian goal scoring of the year for sure.
Got it. Did Mkhitaryan's team, did they win?
I don't know. Don't quote me, dude.
Okay.
I should check. And he also had one hell of a scorpion kick in the Premier League in the UK for Manchester United. So this man, I'll be honest with you, Mkhitaryan, like, he can retire. He's already done a lot. I was just hoping that would be that next generation of Armenian Mkhitaryan's pulling up.
Yeah.
And the judge is still out on that one. I don't know.
Right.
I hope so. Yeah. Anyways.
All right. Well, listen, we're gonna, I'm gonna put all of the links that we pulled up for this week's episode, and I'm gonna put them in the feed. There's obviously a lot to talk about, but we don't have any more time today. So what we will do is put them up there, and you can do the research. We've talked a little bit about the topics. We've covered a lot of it tonight anyway. Moving forward, though, we're going to have a whole new schedule coming up soon. We're working on a whole new look and deployment method. So we got a lot of stuff coming up. So keep paying attention to our Facebook page and your emails for the different things that we've got coming up. I would like to give everybody the call to action really quickly before we head out. Okay.
Should we mention Hrant Dink 15 years?
Yes.
Of course.
Yes.
We will. Not to end on a somber, not on a
just
somber.
Completely just hijacked my thing. Of course we were going to do that. The call to action is that right now there is the idea that we're going to be selling F-16s to Turkey, which are, of course, military planes. And if you want to try and stop or prevent or tell Congress to reject that sale, this is the way to do it. The Armenian Assembly has got a terrific link. You just click on it, take action now, and it'll walk you through the whole thing. David, to your point, let's talk a little bit about Hrant Dink.
Yeah, not to be all somber at our end, but the 15th anniversary of his murder was this month, and we wanted to make sure that we mentioned that so everyone was aware.
Yeah, and I don't think it's that somber. I think this falls in line with the call to action, David. I mean, if you know who Hrant Dink was, he was a publisher and he was an Armenian writer and editor and of a very prolific publication in Istanbul. And, so he, what was that?
The Armenian paper Agos,
That's
which I
right.
believe was Turkish print, right, Greg? It was Turkish print, but Armenian paper.
Why would I know that, man? I'm just kidding, but it's like, yeah. I would need
I want
to
to make sure that I have that right.
Yeah.
Right. So, and he was gunned down by a young nationalist who was in many ways heralded as a hero. And so, this is an opportunity for us to reflect. This is the kind of man who is working towards some form of reconciliation, but doing so under the auspices of truth and clarity. And you can't have truth and reconciliation. You can't have any atonement. How do I put this? You can't have any reconciliation without truth and atonement, is what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
Exactly.
I don't always, I have to grapple with my thoughts on how to approach the move forward scenario with Turkey. Obviously, we have to protect our own interests always. One thing that I noticed that did kind of emerge, and then this whole war just kind of killed it. There are a lot of Turks now in Turkey realizing that they have Armenian roots.
Yeah.
And I don't know which direction that's going to take things. But I'd like to think that it's positive, okay? Because they are at least waking up to truth, while many of them might kind of like push it aside, like a good 10% probably won't let it go, you know what I mean? And
Right.
because once you imagine you find out something about yourself, even in our age now, like, right? I think I want to research more into it, and that could only lead to a better thing. So anyways, that was very much attributed a lot of it to Hrant Dink and his foundation. And that's a good thing. And RIP, he was a good man.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, I think it's a shame that spurring the conversation helped expedite his demise. But it also showcases, when Anna was talking about teaching people how to do it. We have to break that cycle by educating through openness, and Dink was one of the kinds of people that were trying to do that, and unfortunately cost him his life. So I think my takeaway is that we have to keep doing it regardless of the cost.
Absolutely. And shout out to Garo Palan, the member of parliament in Turkey, in the Turkish parliament, who spoke Armenian on the Turkish parliament floor on that day to commemorate Hrant Dink.
Okay. Y'all. Okay. Peace and love. But I think we gotta call it. Otherwise, I'm gonna start.
No, I was just saying.
Otherwise, I'm gonna mention my opinion of what I gotta say, and I'm not gonna say it. So we should go.
All right, guys. Let's wrap. Have a good night. Let's do it. Thanks everyone for watching.
Love you guys.
Okay, stay tuned. Keep paying attention to us on Facebook, and keep watching your emails for our next episode. And we will try and get into a regular rhythm for everyone, including getting yourselves on our calendar and vice versa. And we'll just take it from there. And so thanks again for watching us. It's been a great show. Thanks for everything.
Yep. And don't forget the link tree, like you always say.
That's right.
All right, guys. Good night.
Good night.